The first time Ethan Armstrong saw the girl stealing from his garden, he nearly shot her through the heart. It was late summer in 1878, and the Arizona Territory heat still clung to the earth, even as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan had been tending his small homestead just outside of Tucson for 3 years now, ever since he'd left the cattle drives behind for a quieter life. The garden he'd managed to coax from the stubborn desert soil was his pride, a testament to patience and backbreaking work in a land that gave nothing freely. So when he spotted movement among his squash plants that evening, his first instinct was to reach for the rifle always kept near the door. Through the gathering dusk, he could make out a slender figure crouched low, hands working quickly to gather vegetables into a woven basket. The intruder moved with practiced silence, but Ethan had learned to notice the small disturbances in his carefully ordered world. A broken stem here, displaced earth there. This wasn't the first time someone had taken from his garden. He'd noticed missing produce for weeks now, always small amounts, never enough to truly anger him but enough to make him watchful. He raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Then the figure straightened slightly, and moonlight caught her profile. A girl, young, with long, dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Apache, he realized, taking in her buckskin dress and moccasins. She couldn't have been more than 18 or 19, though it was hard to tell in the dim light. Something in her movement spoke of desperation rather than malice, a careful efficiency that suggested she was taking only what she needed. Ethan lowered the rifle slowly. He'd heard the stories, knew that many of the Apache bands in the area were struggling, caught between the advancing tide of settlement and the increasingly harsh policies of the territorial government. The reservations were overcrowded, supplies often failed to arrive, and those who tried to live in the old ways found their hunting grounds shrinking year by year. The girl filled her basket and melted back into the darkness as silently as she'd come. Ethan stood in his doorway for a long time after she'd gone, thinking. The next evening, he set out a plate of bread and dried meat near the edge of the garden, placing it on a flat stone where it would be visible. Then he retreated to his house and waited. The girl came again as darkness fell, approaching cautiously. She spotted the food immediately and froze, scanning the shadows for any sign of a trap. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, hunger or curiosity overcame caution. She darted forward, snatched the plate, and disappeared into the scrubland. Ethan made this his routine. Each evening he would leave food, and each evening it would be gone by morning. Sometimes he caught glimpses of her. Other times there was only the empty plate as evidence she'd been there. He began to vary what he left, testing to see what she preferred. Fresh vegetables, obviously, cornbread, strips of jerky, a canteen of clean water which she always returned, empty but carefully placed back where she'd found it. 3 weeks into this silent exchange, everything changed. Ethan was checking his fence line when he heard the shot. It came from the direction of the main road, followed by shouting and the thunder of hooves. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the sound, his heart pounding. When he crested the small rise that overlooked the road, he saw 3 men on horseback circling something on the ground. As he got closer, his blood ran cold. The girl lay in the dust, her basket overturned beside her, vegetables scattered across the road. One of the men was aiming his pistol down at her while the other 2 laughed. They were rough-looking characters, the kind of drifters who sometimes pass through on their way to nowhere in particular, looking for trouble or easy money. Well, what do we have here? The one with the pistol drawled. Little Apache thief, bet there's still bounty on your kind in some places. Please, the girl said, and Ethan was struck by how clear her English was, barely accented. I have taken nothing from you. Let me pass." "Maybe we don't want to let you pass," another man said, dismounting. "Maybe we want to have some fun first." Ethan didn't think, just acted. He raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air. All four figures startled, heads snapping toward him as he strode down the slope. "The girl's with me," he called out, his voice hard and level. "And I don't take kindly to folks threatening my people." The three men exchanged glances. The one who'd been aiming at the girl slowly holstered his weapon. "Didn't know she belonged to anyone," he said carefully, clearly reassessing the situation. "No offense meant. None taken long as you ride on. Now." Ethan kept the rifle trained on them, his face expressionless. They mounted up without further argument, though not without dark looks in his direction. As they rode off, kicking up dust, Ethan finally let himself breathe. He lowered the rifle and walked over to where the girl still sat in the road. She was watching him with eyes the color of dark honey, wide with surprise and something that might have been fear. "You hurt?" he asked, extending a hand to help her up. She ignored his hand, rising to her feet on her own and brushing dust from her dress. "I can stand myself," she said. Her voice was steady despite what had just happened. "You did not need to do that." "Seemed like I did," Ethan replied. He bent to help gather the scattered vegetables, placing them back in her basket. "Those men weren't planning to just let you go. I would have managed." But there was less certainty in her voice now. "Maybe." He handed her the basket. "Name's Ethan Armstrong. I own the homestead about half a mile that way." He gestured toward his property. She studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to reveal. "Elara," she said finally. "Elara Neshota." "Elara," he repeated. "Pretty name. Listen, it's going to be dark soon and those men might circle back. Why don't you come to the house? I can make sure you get home safe after we've got some food in you." "I do not need your charity." "It's not charity. Figure you've been eating my vegetables for the better part of 2 months now. Least I can do is cook them proper." He allowed himself a small smile. She had the grace to look embarrassed, color rising in her cheeks. "You knew." "Course I knew. I may be just a cowboy, but I'm not blind." He started walking toward his homestead, glancing back at her. "Coming." After a moment's hesitation, Elara followed. The inside of Ethan's house was simple but clean. A single room divided into living and sleeping areas with a stone fireplace and a small kitchen. Elara stood uncertainly near the door while he lit lamps and began pulling out ingredients for a meal. "You can sit," he said, nodding toward the rough-hewn table and chairs. "I don't bite." "Why are you helping me?" she asked, but she did sit, perching on the edge of a chair as if ready to bolt at any moment. "Because those men would have hurt you, maybe worse." He began slicing vegetables, his hands moving with practiced ease. "Because you were hungry enough to risk stealing from a stranger's garden every night for weeks. Because it's the right thing to do." He paused. "Do I need more reasons than that? Most white men would not." "I'm not most white men." He added wood to the fire, building it up. "How long has it been since you had a proper meal?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ethan cooked in silence for a while, aware of her watching his every move. When he placed a plate of food in front of her, fried vegetables and meat with fresh bread, she stared at it like she wasn't quite sure it was real. "Eat," he said gently. "It's not poisoned and you won't owe me anything for it." She ate slowly at first, then faster, the hunger she'd been hiding taking over. Ethan fixed his own plate and sat across from her, giving her space. When she finally slowed down, some of the tension had left her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." He took a drink of water. "Can I ask what you're doing out here alone? You've got family," her expression shuddered. "I did. My father died last winter, pneumonia. My mother passed when I was young. I'm sorry. My father was a good man. He worked as a scout for the army, tried to keep peace between our people and yours. It did not always work. She met his eyes. I had a brother too, Miguel. He was killed 2 years ago by men who thought all Apache should be hunted like animals. The bitterness in her voice was understandable, and Ethan felt a wave of shame for his own people, for the cruelty and injustice that seemed to follow the westward expansion like a shadow. "I'm sorry," he said again, knowing the words were inadequate. "After my father died, I tried to stay with my mother's people on the reservation, but—" She shook her head. "There is not enough. Not enough food, not enough water, not enough hope. I left to find my own way. And you've been living out there alone." He gestured toward the desert beyond his walls. "I know how to survive. My father taught me to hunt, to find water, to read the land. I manage. By stealing vegetables. It wasn't quite a question. By taking what I need to live." She raised her chin. "I do not apologize for surviving." "I'm not asking you to." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "But I am asking you to let me help, properly, not just scraps left out like you're some stray dog." "Why would you do that?" It was a fair question, and Ethan found he didn't have a simple answer. He'd been living alone for so long, focused on his own small piece of land, his own quiet existence. But something about Elara had gotten under his skin from the moment he'd first seen her in his garden. Maybe it was the courage it took to survive alone in such harsh country. Maybe it was the intelligence he saw in her eyes, or the pride that kept her spine straight even when she was clearly desperate. "Because I can," he said finally. "Because I've got more than I need and you've got less. That seems like reason enough." She studied him for a long moment, searching for the trick, the hidden price. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her because she gave a small nod. "I will not be a burden. Didn't think you would be." They worked out an arrangement that night. Elara would come by the homestead each day. In exchange for work, helping tend the garden and the small number of livestock Ethan kept, she would receive meals and whatever supplies she needed. She refused his offer to sleep in the house, insisting she had a camp she felt safe in, but she did accept a better blanket and a knife he could spare. As he walked her partway back to her camp that night, both of them watchful for any sign of the 3 men from earlier, Ethan realized his quiet life was about to get a lot more complicated. He found, somewhat to his surprise, that he didn't mind. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite its strangeness. Elara would arrive shortly after dawn, moving through the desert like a shadow given form. She worked hard, never complaining, and proved to know far more about coaxing plants from difficult soil than Ethan had learned in his years of trial and error. The garden began to thrive under their combined attention. She was teaching him, he realized. Small things at first. Which plants to place together so they helped each other grow. How to read the subtle signs that meant rain might be coming, even in this arid land. Where to find wild herbs that could be used for medicine or cooking. In return, he shared what he knew about ranching and the practical matters of homesteading. They talked while they worked, tentative conversations at first, then deeper ones. Elara had been educated at a mission school as a child, which explained her fluent English. She could read and write in both English and Spanish, and she'd learned the traditional knowledge of her people from her father and grandmother. She was caught between worlds, she told him, belonging fully to neither. Ethan understood that feeling more than he let on. He'd grown up on a small farm in Missouri, lost his parents to cholera when he was 16, and headed west with nothing but a horse and the clothes on his back. He'd worked cattle drives, done some mining, even spent a miserable winter as a lawman's deputy before finally settling on this land. He'd always been on the outside looking in, never quite fitting with the other cowboys, too quiet and too thoughtful for their rough camaraderie. "Why did you choose here?" Elara asked one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence that had been damaged by a wandering deer. "This is hard land." "That's why," Ethan said, stretching wire between posts. "Nobody else wanted it. I could afford it, and I figured if I could make it work, it would really be mine, something nobody could take away." "There is no such thing as land nobody can take away," Elara said softly. "My people learned that." He paused in his work, meeting her eyes. "You're right, I'm sorry, that was thoughtless. You did not take our land. You were not here for that. No, but I benefit from it all the same." He drove a nail into the post with more force than necessary. "That sits uneasy with me sometimes." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "My father used to say that we cannot change the past, only what we do in the present. You could have shot me that first night. You could have turned away when those men threatened me. You did not. That matters." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a connection that made Ethan's heart beat faster. He looked away first, unsettled by the intensity of what he'd felt. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself looking forward to Elara's arrivals with an eagerness that had nothing to do with the work she did. He began to notice small things about her. The way she hummed softly to herself when she thought he couldn't hear. How her whole face transformed when she smiled, which was rare but devastating. The graceful efficiency of her movements, whether she was wielding a hoe or reaching up to pluck an apple from his small orchard. He was falling in love with her. He realized one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and red. The realization should have terrified him. The complications were endless. The danger, both from those who would disapprove and those who would actively try to harm them for daring to cross the invisible line society drew between people. But instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of certainty, as if this had always been meant to happen. Elara was laughing at something he'd said, a story about a particularly stubborn bull from his cattle driving days, when she suddenly went still. Her head turned, her body tensing like a deer sensing a predator. "Someone is coming," she said quietly. Ethan heard it a moment later, hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town. He stood, moving to where his rifle leaned against the wall. 2 riders came into view, and he relaxed slightly when he recognized one of them. Tom Ashford, the nearest neighbor, whose property started about 3 miles to the east. The man with him was unfamiliar, thin and sharp-faced with the look of someone used to giving orders. "Evening, Ethan," Tom called as they rode up. His eyes went to Elara and his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tom," Ethan replied, not moving from the porch, "what brings you out this way?" "This is Mr. Harrison from the territorial office in Tucson. He's looking for someone, thought maybe you might have seen her." Tom's voice was carefully neutral. Harrison pulled a piece of paper from his coat and held it up. Even from a distance, Ethan could see it was some kind of notice with a rough sketch. His stomach sank. Apache girl, about 18 or 19 years old. She's wanted for questioning in connection with some thefts from stores in Tucson. Also, she left the reservation without permission, which is a violation of federal law. Harrison's eyes were fixed on Elara. "That her sitting on your porch?" "The girl on my porch is my hired help," Ethan said evenly. "Name's Elara Neshota. She's been working my land for wages, all legal and proper." "Apache can't just leave the reservation," Harrison said. "Regulations are clear. Her father was a scout, died in service. She's not bound to the reservation. Check your own records if you don't believe me." Ethan had no idea if this was true, but he said it with enough confidence that Harrison hesitated. "And the thefts? What thefts specifically?" Elara spoke up, her voice calm despite the tension in her shoulders. "I have taken nothing from any store. I have been here, working this land for many weeks now." Witnesses said they saw an Apache girl near the general store on several occasions when items went missing. "There are many Apache girls. Why do you assume it was me?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "The reservation agent says you left without proper authorization. That alone is enough to bring you in." "The reservation agent is a drunk who steals half the supplies meant for my people and sells them in town," Elara said flatly. "Forgive me if I do not put much stock in his word." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. He was a decent enough man, Ethan knew, but not one to make waves or stand against authority. "Look," Ethan said, stepping forward, "I don't know anything about thefts or regulations. What I know is that Elara has been here, working honestly, bothering nobody. If there's been trouble in town, it wasn't her causing it." "You willing to vouch for her?" Harrison asked. "I am." Harrison considered this, his eyes moving between Ethan and Elara. Finally, he folded the paper and tucked it back into his coat. "I'll be checking with the territorial office about her father's service record. If it doesn't match what you say, I'll be back with a marshal. In the meantime, Miss Neshoda, I suggest you stay close to this property and out of town." "Understood," Elara nodded stiffly. The two men turned their horses and rode off, leaving a thick silence in their wake. Ethan watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned to find Elara standing, her basket clutched in her hands. "I should go," she said. "I have brought trouble to you." "You haven't brought anything I can't handle. You do not understand. If they think you are hiding me, helping me, they will come for you too. You could lose everything. Then let them come." He moved closer to her. "Elara, I'm not going to turn you away because some bureaucrat with a piece of paper says you're where you're not supposed to be. This is wrong and you know it. Many things are wrong. That does not mean we can fight them all. Maybe not all of them, but this one, I can fight for that." The words hung in the air between them, carrying more meaning than he'd intended to reveal. She searched his face, and he saw the moment she understood what he was really saying. Her expression softened, became something vulnerable and uncertain. "Ethan." "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just need you to know that you're safe here with me for as long as you need." "Why?" The word was almost a whisper. "Why would you risk so much for me?" He could have given her a dozen practical reasons, could have talked about justice and fairness and doing what was right. But in that moment, with the last light of day fading and her eyes searching his, he chose honesty. "Because somewhere along the way, you became important to me. More important than I knew how to say." He took a breath. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and that might be foolish and complicated and dangerous, but it's true all the same." Elara's eyes widened, and for a moment he thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and placed her hand against his chest, right over his heart. "It is foolish," she said softly, "and complicated and dangerous. I know. But perhaps I am foolish too." She looked up at him, and the emotion in her eyes made his breath catch. "Because I think I have been falling in love with you as well." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them again, he saw his own feelings reflected back at him. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape of this new thing between them. Then her hand fisted in his shirt and his arm went around her waist, pulling her closer. And the kiss deepened into something that made the rest of the world fall away when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Elara rested her forehead against his chest. He could feel her trembling slightly, or maybe that was him. "What do we do now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out together." She stayed that night, though they both knew it would cause talk if anyone found out. They lay together in his bed, fully clothed, simply holding each other and talking in low voices about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, the good memories of her father teaching her to track and hunt, her mother's songs. He told her about growing up on the farm, his dreams of building something that would last. "I never thought I could have this," she said at some point deep in the night. "After my brother died, after my father, I thought I would always be alone. It seemed safer that way. I know what you mean. I've been keeping people at arm's length for years." He ran his fingers through her hair, marveling at the softness of it. "Easier than risking loss. But you let me in. You made it impossible not to." He tilted her chin up so he could see her face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I'm glad you did." She kissed him again, slow and sweet, and he thought this might be the happiest he'd ever been. The happiness proved fragile. 3 days later, Harrison returned with 2 other men, one wearing a marshal's badge. They arrived mid-morning to find Ethan and Elara working in the garden together. "Armstrong," the marshal called out. He was an older man with gray in his beard and tired eyes. "Need to have a word." Ethan straightened, wiping dirt from his hands. "Marshal, what can I do for you?" "Checked into your girl's story. Her father was indeed a scout, contracted to the army. Thing is, his contract specified that his family would be provided for on the San Carlos reservation in exchange for his service. That means his daughter here is legally required to reside there unless she has written permission otherwise." He pulled out a folded document. "Do you have such permission, Miss Nashota?" "No," Elara said quietly, "but the reservation is not safe. The agent there is corrupt, and many are starving because supplies are stolen or sold." "I've heard those complaints," the marshal said, not unkindly, "and I've filed reports about it. But until there's an investigation and things are sorted, the law says you need to return. And if I refuse, then I have to arrest you and take you back by force. I'd rather not do that." Ethan stepped closer to Elara. "There has to be another way. What if I petition to have her released from the reservation requirement? What if we get married?" The words were out before he'd fully thought them through, but once said, he realized he meant them completely. Elara's head whipped toward him, her eyes wide. The marshal looked between them thoughtfully. "You serious about that, son?" "Yes, sir, I am." Marriage might change her legal status, but it would have to be properly done, and even then, there'd be folks who would fight it. Apache and white marriages aren't exactly common or welcomed around here. He paused. "And there's still the matter of those thefts. If she's arrested on suspicion of that, marriage won't protect her." "I told you I stole nothing," Elara said firmly. "Maybe not, but the shopkeeper swears it was an Apache girl matching your description. Until we can prove otherwise, that charge stands. What if we found who really did it?" Ethan asked. "Would that clear her?" "Might. But how do you propose to do that? Give us 2 weeks. Let her stay here working for me, and we'll find out who's really been stealing from that store. If we can't prove her innocence by then, she'll go back to the reservation willingly." The marshal chewed his lip, considering. Harrison started to protest, but the marshal held up a hand. "I'm inclined to give them the chance. 2 weeks, Armstrong, not a day more, and she doesn't leave this property without my permission." "Agreed, agreed," Ethan said. "Thank you, Marshal," Elara added quietly. The men rode off, and Elara turned to Ethan, her expression a mix of gratitude and exasperation. "You cannot just announce you want to marry me like that." "Why not? It's true. You have known me less than 2 months. I know enough." He took her hands in his. "I know you're brave and smart and kind. I know you make me laugh and make me think and make me want to be a better man. I know I love you, and I want to spend my life proving it to you. He paused. But if you need more time, I understand. The offer stands either way. She stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head with a small laugh. You are impossible. Is that a yes or a no? It is a let us solve this problem first and then discuss it. But she was smiling, and when she squeezed his hands, he felt hope bloom in his chest. They rode into Tucson the next day, having received the marshal's permission for the trip. Ethan wanted to investigate the thefts himself, to talk to the shopkeeper and see if they could find any clues that might help clear Elara's name. The town was bustling, a mix of Anglo settlers, Mexican families who'd been there long before the territory changed hands, and various Apache and other native peoples conducting trade. The general store sat on the main street, a sturdy building with large windows displaying goods. Inside, the shopkeeper looked up from his counter with a welcoming smile that faded slightly when he saw Elara. "Can I help you folks?" "Hope so," Ethan said. "I'm Ethan Armstrong, and this is Elara Neshota. I understand there have been some thefts from your store." The shopkeeper's expression became guarded. "That's right. Lost quite a bit of merchandise over the past couple months. Why do you ask?" "Because there's been some suggestion that Elara here might be responsible. She's not, but we'd like to help figure out who is if we can." "No offense, but that girl matches the description I gave the territorial office. Apache young about her height and build." "That could describe a lot of people," Elara said. "What exactly was stolen?" The shopkeeper pulled out a ledger and flipped through it. "Food, mostly. Jerky, flour, canned goods, some cloth, a few tools. Things went missing when I wasn't looking, usually when the store was busy." "Was it always when you saw an Apache girl in the store?" Ethan asked. "Well, no. Sometimes I didn't see anyone suspicious at all. That's what made it so frustrating." "So you can't actually be sure it was the same person every time, or even that it was an Apache girl at all?" Ethan pressed. The shopkeeper frowned. "I suppose not when you put it that way, but I did see an Apache girl acting suspicious on at least 2 occasions." "Can you describe her more specifically?" "She was young, had her hair in a long braid down her back, wore a blue dress with white beadwork on it." Elara shook her head. "I do not own such a dress, and I have not been in this store in over 6 months. Do you remember anything else about her?" Ethan asked. "Any distinguishing features?" The shopkeeper thought for a moment. "She had a scar, I think, here." He gestured to his left cheek. "Elara doesn't have a scar," Ethan pointed out. "No, but she could have been hiding it, or maybe I'm misremembering." The man was beginning to sound less certain. They talked for a while longer, but it became clear the shopkeeper had formed an opinion and wasn't easily swayed from it, even with the holes in his story. As they left the store, Elara looked discouraged. "He wants to believe it was me," she said. It is easier to blame an Apache than to admit he does not really know who has been stealing from him. Maybe, but there was something useful in what he said. The girl he saw had a scar and wore a blue dress with white beadwork. That's specific. If we can find someone matching that description, we might be able to prove it wasn't you. They spent the next few days asking careful questions around Tucson, trying to find anyone who might have seen the girl with the scarred face. It was delicate work. Many people were reluctant to talk about theft, and the Apache community was understandably wary of answering questions that might implicate one of their own. Finally, they caught a break. An elderly Mexican woman who sold vegetables in the market mentioned seeing a young Apache girl matching the description hanging around the alleys behind the stores. "She looked hungry," the woman said. "Desperate. I wanted to help her, but she ran off before I could offer food." "Do you know where she might be staying?" Ethan asked. The woman shook her head, but she suggested they check with Father Ramirez at the mission. "He helps many of the Apache who come through town looking for work or food. If anyone would know about a girl in trouble, it would be him. The mission was a small adobe building on the edge of town, its simple cross visible from the main street. Father Ramirez was a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and work-worn hands. When they explained what they were looking for, his expression grew troubled. "There is a girl who has come here a few times for food," he admitted. "She matches the description you give. Her name is Maria, I think, though she does not talk much. I know she has been living rough, maybe in one of the abandoned buildings near the old tannery. Can you help us find her?" Elara asked. "I do not want to frighten her, but I need to clear my name, and if she is truly desperate, perhaps we can help her too." The priest agreed, and that evening he led them to a crumbling structure that had once been used for storage. Inside, huddled in a corner wrapped in a threadbare blanket, they found the girl. She looked younger than Elara, maybe 16 or 17, and she did indeed have a scar running down her left cheek. She also had a blue dress, though it was dirty and torn now. She scrambled to her feet when they entered, looking ready to run. "Please do not be afraid," Elara said gently, speaking in Apache. "We are not here to hurt you, we want to help." The girl's eyes darted between them. "I do not need help." "I think maybe you do," Elara continued. "Your name is Maria. I am Elara. This is Ethan and Father Ramirez. We know you have been taking food from the store in town." Maria's face went pale. "I will go to jail." "Maybe not," Ethan said. "Depends on why you were doing it and whether you're willing to tell the truth." "Were you stealing to sell the goods or because you were hungry?" "Hungry," Maria whispered. "Always hungry. My family is on the reservation, but I ran away. The agent there, She trailed off, her face twisting with remembered fear. Elara moved closer, understanding dawning on her face. "He hurt you," Maria nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I could not stay, but I had nowhere to go, no way to eat. I am sorry for stealing. I did not know what else to do." Father Ramirez made a sound of distress and anger. "This agent, what is his name?" Maria told them, and it was the same man Elara had mentioned, the one she'd said was corrupt and cruel. Ethan felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down. Right now, they needed to focus on helping Maria and clearing Elara's name. "Listen," he said carefully. "If you come with us and tell the marshal what you just told us, tell him why you were stealing and who you are, it might go easier on you. And we can make sure that agent is investigated for what he did. They will not believe me. I am just an Apache girl." "They'll believe you if enough people speak up," Ethan said. "And I promise you, we'll help you. You won't be alone in this." It took some convincing, but eventually Maria agreed. The next day, they all went to the marshal's office together. Maria was terrified, barely able to speak at first, but with Elara beside her holding her hand and Father Ramirez vouching for her character, she managed to tell her story. The marshal listened with a deepening frown. When she was finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is a serious accusation against a federal employee. It is also the truth," Father Ramirez said firmly, "and I have heard similar stories from other girls. I should have spoken up sooner, but I feared no one would listen." "I'll listen," the marshal said, "and I'll investigate. As for you, Miss Maria, you've admitted to theft. That's a crime." "Sir," Ethan interrupted, "she's a child who was running for her life from a man who should have been protecting her. She stole food because the alternative was starving. That's not the same as a criminal act done for profit or malice." The marshal studied Ethan for a long moment. "You making yourself responsible for a lot of people lately, Armstrong, just trying to do right. What are you proposing?" "Let Maria stay with Father Ramirez at the mission. She can work there to make restitution for what she stole. And while you're investigating the agent, make sure she's protected from any retaliation." "And what about you, Miss Nashota?" This clears you of the theft charges, but there's still the matter of you being off the reservation." Ethan and Elara exchanged glances. He could see the decision forming in her eyes, the courage it took to say what she said next. "I wish to marry Ethan Armstrong," Elara stated clearly. "If that will change my legal status and allow me to stay with him, then that is what I want." The marshal raised his eyebrows. "You sure about that, both of you?" "Yes," they said in unison. "Well then, marriage would indeed change your status, Miss Nashoda. You'd be the wife of a landowner, which gives you certain rights and protections. It won't make things easy, understand. There'll be folks who disapprove, maybe make trouble." "We understand," Ethan said, reaching for Elara's hand. "All right then, I'll get the paperwork started. You can be married by the justice of the peace here in town, or if you prefer, Father Ramirez could do it." "The mission," Elara said. "If Father Ramirez is willing," the priest smiled. "It would be my honor." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the mission. Maria was there, looking healthier already after a few days of regular meals and a safe place to sleep. Tom Ashford came too, somewhat to Ethan's surprise, along with a few other neighbors who'd proven to be decent people. Elara wore a dress that Father Ramirez's housekeeper had helped her make, simple white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and sleeves. She'd woven flowers into her hair, and when Ethan saw her walking toward him down the mission's short aisle, his breath caught in his throat. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The ceremony was brief, conducted in both English and Spanish, with Father Ramirez speaking words about love and commitment and the joining of two souls. When it came time for the vows, Ethan held both of Elara's hands and looked into her eyes. "I promise to love you and protect you," he said. "To stand beside you through whatever comes, to build a life with you that honors both of us and where we came from. This I swear." Elara's voice was steady despite the emotion Ethan could see shining in her eyes. "I promise to love you and stand with you, to share your burdens and your joys. To be your partner in all things. This I swear." They exchanged simple gold bands that Ethan had bought in town, and when Father Ramirez pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan pulled Elara close and kissed her to scattered applause and a few whoops from Tom. The celebration afterward was modest but warm. The mission's housekeeper had prepared food, and there was music from a guitar player who happened to be visiting. Ethan and Elara danced together under the stars, swaying to the gentle melody, lost in each other. "Are you happy?" he asked her, his lips close to her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "Are you happier than I have words for?" He pulled back to look at her face. "I love you, Elara Armstrong." She smiled, brilliant and joyful. "I love you, Ethan Armstrong." They rode back to the homestead that night as husband and wife, both mounted on Ethan's horse with Elara sitting in front of him, her back against his chest. The desert was quiet except for the sound of hooves on dirt and the occasional call of a night bird. When they arrived home, Ethan dismounted first, then lifted Elara down, letting her slide slowly against him. The air between them was charged with anticipation and a nervousness that was somehow sweet. "I should tend the horse," Ethan said, though he made no move to step away. "The horse can wait a moment," Elara replied, reaching up to touch his face. He kissed her then, deep and slow, pouring everything he felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come inside with me," he said softly. "Come home." She took his hand and let him lead her into the house that was now theirs together. That night, they learned each other with gentle hands and whispered words, building something new between them, a bond that went beyond the legal words spoken at the mission. When Elara fell asleep in his arms, her head resting on his chest, Ethan lay awake for a long time, marveling at the unexpected path his life had taken. He'd thought he was content alone, that his small homestead and quiet existence were enough. Then a hungry Apache girl had started stealing from his garden, and everything had changed. He'd given her food and found his heart following shortly after. Life settled into a new pattern. Elara was no longer his hired help but his wife, his partner in every sense. They worked the land together, expanding the garden and building up the small herd of cattle and chickens. She taught him more about the land, about which plants could be used for medicine and which were good for dye. He taught her the details of running a homestead, the bookkeeping and planning that went into making a living from difficult soil. Word of their marriage spread, as word always did in sparse country where everyone knew everyone else's business. The reactions were mixed. Some neighbors were supportive, or at least neutral. Others made their disapproval clear, refusing to trade with Ethan or speak to him in town. There were a few tense moments, including one evening when someone fired a shot through their window, shattering glass across the floor. Ethan had grabbed his rifle and rushed outside, but whoever it was had already ridden off into the darkness. Elara had been shaken but refused to let it break her spirit. "They want us to be afraid," she said as they cleaned up the glass. "They want us to feel like we made a mistake." "But we did not, did we?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "We didn't, and we're not going to let them drive us apart or drive us away." They replaced the window and kept living their lives, refusing to hide or apologize for their love. The marshal proved to be a man of his word. He investigated the reservation agent thoroughly, uncovering evidence of theft, abuse, and corruption that went back years. The man was removed from his position and arrested, though whether he would face real justice remained to be seen. Still, it was something. Maria thrived at the mission, working alongside Father Ramirez and learning skills that would help her build an independent life. She visited Ethan and Elara occasionally, slowly becoming more confident and happy. Seeing her heal helped ease some of the anger. Elara carried about the injustices her people faced. As autumn turned to winter, Elara began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first she tried to hide it, not wanting to worry Ethan, but he noticed her pallor and the way she sometimes had to stop working to compose herself. "You're sick," he said one morning after she'd rushed outside to be ill. "We need to get you to a doctor." "I do not need a doctor," she said, wiping her mouth with a cloth. "I know what this is." He stared at her, understanding dawning slowly. "You're with child," she confirmed, a tentative smile crossing her face. "I think so, yes." Joy crashed over him like a wave. He picked her up and spun her around, making her laugh and protest. When he set her down, he was grinning so wide his face hurt. "We're going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are." Her smile matched his. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He pulled her close, resting his hand on her still flat stomach. "A little person, half you and half me. That's everything." They stood there together in the morning light, holding each other and marveling at the life they'd created. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Elara suffered from sickness through the first few months, and Ethan worried constantly, trying to make sure she didn't overwork herself while knowing she'd be furious if he tried to coddle her too much. They found a balance, learning to navigate this new challenge together as they had all the others. As her belly grew, Ethan found himself talking to it, telling their unborn child stories about the homestead, about how he and Elara had met, about the life they were building. Elara would laugh at him, but he could see the tenderness in her eyes. They prepared as best they could, building a cradle from wood Ethan carefully selected and sanded smooth. Elara sewed baby clothes from soft fabric, her hands moving with practiced skill. The mission's housekeeper, an older woman named Rosita who had helped deliver dozens of babies, agreed to assist when the time came, Winter gave way to spring, and with it came new challenges. There was talk that some of the Apache bands in the mountains were being forcibly relocated to reservations farther away, and tensions were running high. Ethan and Elara kept to themselves as much as possible, not wanting to draw attention. Then one evening, a group of Apache riders appeared on the horizon. Ethan tensed, reaching for his rifle, but Elara put a hand on his arm. "Wait," she said, squinting at the approaching figures. "I know one of them." As they got closer, Elara gasped. "It is my cousin Dakota. I have not seen him since before my father died." The riders stopped at a respectful distance, and one dismounted. He was a man of about 30, tall and lean with intelligent eyes. He approached slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons. "Elara," he said, his face breaking into a smile. "When I heard you had married, I did not believe it, but here you are." "Dakota." She rushed forward and they embraced. When she pulled back, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "I thought I would never see family again." "You are family to us always," Dakota said. He turned to Ethan, his expression becoming more guarded. "You are the cowboy who married my cousin." "I am," Ethan replied evenly. "Ethan Armstrong." Dakota studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "She looks happy, healthy. You treat her well." "I try to treat her as she deserves. With love and respect." "Good. Because if you did not, cousin or no cousin, marriage or no marriage, we would have words." But there was a hint of a smile on his face as he said it. The riders made camp near the homestead that night, and Elara spent hours catching up with Dakota and the others, speaking in rapid Apache that Ethan couldn't follow. He didn't mind. The joy on her face was worth any amount of exclusion. Later, Dakota sought him out where he sat watching the fire. "May I sit?" the Apache man asked. "Of course." They sat in companionable silence for a while before Dakota spoke. "Elara told me how you met, how you helped her when others would have turned her away or worse, how you stood up for Maria." "Did what anyone should do," Ethan said. "But most do not." Dakota paused. "These are hard times for my people. We are being pushed from our lands, forced onto reservations where we are treated as prisoners. Many of the old ways are dying. It is easy to become angry, to see all white men as enemies. I understand that. But you have shown that not all are enemies. You have given my cousin a home, a life, protection. You have given her love." Dakota looked at him directly. "That matters. It gives me hope that perhaps there can be understanding between our peoples, even in these dark times." "I hope so too," Ethan said. "Though I won't pretend to speak for all my people any more than you can speak for all of yours. I can only control what I do, how I act. That is all any of us can do." Dakota extended his hand. "You are family now, Ethan Armstrong. That means if you ever need help, you send word. We will come." Ethan shook his hand, moved by the gesture. "Thank you. Same goes for you and yours. You need a safe place, food, help of any kind, you come here." The riders left the next morning, but the visit had lifted Elara's spirits immeasurably. She seemed lighter, happier, knowing that she hadn't lost all connection to her people. As summer approached, Elara grew large with the baby, moving more slowly but still insisting on doing her share of work. Ethan finally had to put his foot down when he found her trying to repair the roof of the chicken coop. "Absolutely not," he said, taking the hammer from her hand. "You're 8 months pregnant. You are not climbing on roofs." "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested. "I know that. But I also know that if you fall and hurt yourself or the baby, I will never forgive myself. Please, Elara, let me do the heavy work right now. You can supervise and tell me if I am doing it wrong." She grumbled but agreed, and they fell into a new routine where she directed and he did the physical labor. It actually worked well, as Elara had a good eye for what needed doing and in what order. The baby came on a sweltering July afternoon. Elara's water broke while she was making bread, and within an hour the pains had started in earnest. Ethan rode for Reseda as fast as his horse could carry him, then spent the next 12 hours pacing outside while Elara labored inside. He'd helped deliver calves and foals, had seen birth dozens of times, but this was different. This was Elara, the woman he loved, going through something he couldn't help with or protect her from. Every cry of pain that escaped through the door made him flinch. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, thin and outraged at being thrust into the world. Reseda opened the door, smiling despite her exhaustion. "You have a son," she said. "Strong and healthy, come meet him." Ethan entered the room on shaking legs. Elara lay on the bed, her hair damp with sweat, looking utterly exhausted and absolutely radiant. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in cloth. As he approached, she pulled the fabric back to reveal a tiny face, wrinkled and red with a shock of dark hair. "Our son," she said softly. "What should we name him?" Ethan reached out with one finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. The infant's fingers closed around his, gripping with surprising strength. He felt something in his chest crack open, a love so fierce and immediate it stole his breath. "I was thinking, if you agree, we could call him Samuel," Ethan said. "After my father." "Samuel," Elara repeated, testing the name. "Samuel Armstrong. Yes, I like that. And his second name should be Neshota, after my family." "Samuel Neshota Armstrong," Ethan said. "Welcome to the world, son." The baby blinked up at him with unfocused eyes, and Ethan felt his heart expand to encompass this new person who was half him and half Elara, a living bridge between their two worlds. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel was a good baby for the most part, though he had strong opinions about when he wanted to be fed and held. Ethan learned to change diapers and rock the baby to sleep, marveling at how something so small could be so completely in charge of their lives. Elara took to motherhood with the same grace and determination she brought to everything else. She was patient with Samuel's crying and infinitely gentle, but also practical, refusing to panic when the baby had normal infant problems. They had visitors once word spread that the baby had been born. Tom Ashford and his wife came by with a gift of preserves and a hand-knitted blanket. Father Ramirez rode out from the mission with Reseda and Maria to check on mother and baby. Even the marshal stopped by, gruffly congratulating them and admitting that the baby was not bad looking for an infant. Not everyone was kind. They received a letter from someone in town accusing them of polluting white bloodlines and threatening consequences. Ethan burned it without showing Elara, though she found the ashes and knew anyway. "We cannot control what others think," she said, holding Samuel close. "We can only love our son and teach him to be strong and kind." "He'll need to be strong," Ethan said grimly. "Neither world will fully accept him. Then we will teach him to make his own world as we have." She looked up at him, determination in her eyes. "He will know both his heritages. I will teach him the Apache ways, the stories and traditions of my people. You will teach him the skills he needs to survive in this changing world, and together we will teach him that love is stronger than hate." Ethan pulled her and the baby into his embrace. "Yes," he agreed. "That's exactly what we'll do." As Samuel grew from a newborn to an infant who could smile and coo, their homestead continued to develop. With Elara's knowledge and Ethan's hard work, they managed to make the difficult land yield more than it ever had before. They added a room to the house for Samuel, with plans to add more as their family grew. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts and cold snaps, times when money was tight and the future uncertain. There were still people who made their disapproval known in ways both subtle and overt. But there were also moments of pure joy. Samuel's first laugh. The first time he called Ethan Papa and Elara Mama. The evening Dakota and his family visited again, and Samuel was passed around the fire from hand to hand, each person welcoming him into the greater family. When Samuel was 2 years old, Elara told Ethan she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Nate Armstrong, arrived in the spring with far less drama than her brother. She had Ethan's blue eyes and Elara's dark hair, and from the start she was quieter than Samuel, more observant. With 2 children, the homestead felt full of life and purpose. Ethan built a bigger table so they could all eat together. Elara taught both children songs in Apache and English, stories from both cultures. Samuel learned to help his father with the animals, while Grace followed her mother everywhere, absorbing everything she saw. The years passed, marked by the rhythms of planting and harvest, of children growing and learning. When Samuel was 5 and Grace was 3, Elara gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel Ashki Armstrong. He was a happy, fearless child who seemed to have no awareness of danger, keeping his parents constantly on their toes. The homestead prospered. Ethan had expanded their cattle operation, and Elara had developed something of a reputation for her medicinal herbs, which she traded in town and with the Apache bands who still moved through the area. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. Not everyone accepted them, but over time, most people in the area came to a grudging respect. The Armstrongs worked hard, kept to themselves, and raised their children to be respectful and helpful. It was hard to maintain prejudice in the face of that reality, though some still managed. When Samuel turned 10, he asked his parents about why some people in town looked at them differently, why some children weren't allowed to play with him and his siblings. Ethan and Elara exchanged glances, knowing this conversation had been coming. There are people, Elara began carefully, who believe that different groups should not mix, that someone who is Apache like me should not marry someone who is white like your father. They think our family is wrong. But why? Samuel asked, his face troubled. Fear mostly, Ethan said. Fear of what's different, fear of change, and sometimes just plain ignorance and hate that's been passed down from parents to children without anyone questioning it. Are they right? Is our family wrong? No, both parents said firmly. Listen to me, Samuel, Elara said, taking his hands. You are the child of 2 worlds, and that makes you strong, not weak. You carry the blood of warriors and survivors, of people who refuse to give up even when things were hardest. Never let anyone make you ashamed of who you are. Your mother's right, Ethan added. There's nothing wrong with our family. We love each other, we take care of each other, and we try to do right by others. That's what matters. The people who can't see that, that's their failing, not yours. Samuel nodded slowly, processing this. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That conversation marked a turning point. The children grew up knowing they were different, but also knowing they were loved and valued. They learned to navigate the complicated world they'd been born into with grace and strength, just as their parents had hoped. More years passed. Samuel grew into a young man who had his mother's intelligence and his father's steady nature. Grace became a skilled healer, learning everything Elara could teach her and adding knowledge from medical books Ethan bought in Tucson. Daniel proved to have a gift with animals, able to gentle the most difficult horse or convince a stubborn cow to cooperate. Ethan and Elara grew older, their hair gaining streaks of gray, their faces lining with age and sun and laughter. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, seasoned by the years of working together, raising children together, building a life together against the odds. On their 20th anniversary, Ethan took Elara's hand and led her out to the garden where this had all started. It was late summer again, much like that night he'd first seen her stealing vegetables. The plants were heavy with produce, testament to 2 decades of careful tending. "You remember," he asked, "when you used to sneak into this garden to take food? How could I forget?" She leaned against him. "I was terrified you would shoot me." "I almost did, but something stopped me. Even then, before I knew you, before I loved you, something told me you were important." "We have built a good life," Elara said, looking around at the homestead, where she could see Samuel repairing a fence, Grace hanging laundry, and Daniel playing with the dogs. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was alone and stealing vegetables to survive." "It's been the greatest adventure of my life," Ethan said. "Every challenge, every moment of joy, every day with you and our children. I wouldn't change any of it. Neither would I." She turned to kiss him, and it was sweet and familiar and still sent warmth through her. "You left food out for a hungry girl and you gave her everything." "You gave me everything," he corrected. "You and our family, that's all I need." They stood together in the garden as the sun set, painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold and red. Around them, their children and the life they'd built together continued its comfortable rhythm. It hadn't been easy, and there had been pain and struggle along with the happiness. But they'd faced it all together, and they'd created something beautiful and lasting. Samuel eventually married a woman named Rebecca, the daughter of one of the few families who'd always treated the Armstrongs with respect. They built a house on the property and gave Ethan and Elara their first grandchildren, twin boys who reminded Ethan so much of Samuel at that age that it made his heart ache in the best way. Grace married a doctor who came to Tucson from back east, a man who admired her knowledge and saw her as an equal partner. They opened a clinic that served everyone, regardless of background, and Grace became known as one of the best healers in the territory. Daniel took over the ranching side of the operation, expanding the herd and developing new techniques for water conservation that helped the homestead thrive even during dry years. He married late, to a widow with 2 children of her own, and brought them all into the family with the same open-hearted generosity that characterized everything he did. Ethan and Elara grew old surrounded by children and grandchildren, their little homestead becoming the center of an ever-expanding family. They added more rooms to the house, built more buildings, planted more gardens. The land they'd started with expanded as they were able to purchase adjoining parcels, creating a legacy for their descendants. On quiet evenings when the work was done and the grandchildren were in bed, Ethan and Elara would sit on the porch they'd expanded over the years and talk about everything and nothing. They'd reminisce about the early days, laugh about mistakes they'd made, marvel at how much had changed. "Do you think we made a difference?" Elara asked one evening when she was in her 60s. "Beyond our own family, I mean. Do you think we changed anything?" Ethan considered the question. "I think we showed people that love doesn't respect the boundaries they try to draw. That families can be built across cultures and be stronger for it. Not everyone listened, but some did. That's something." "Maria came to see me yesterday," Elara said. "She's a grandmother now, did you know? Her daughter is teaching at the mission school. She said she wanted to thank us again for helping her all those years ago, for giving her a chance. She made something good out of that chance. That's all we could ask." "I think my father would have liked you," Elara said suddenly. "He always believed that understanding between peoples was possible. You proved him right." "I was just a cowboy who fell in love with a beautiful, brave woman," Ethan said. Everything else followed from that. Just a cowboy, Elara repeated with a laugh. You were never just anything, Ethan Armstrong. As they aged into their 70s, they slowed down, letting their children and grandchildren take over more of the physical work. But they remained active, still tending the garden together, still greeting visitors, still serving as the heart of their family. Ethan passed away in his sleep at the age of 76, Elara beside him as she'd been for more than 50 years. His last words to her were, "I love you," the same words he'd said countless times before but which never lost their meaning. Elara grieved deeply but not bitterly. She'd had a full life, a long and happy marriage, children and grandchildren who loved her. She lived for another 3 years after Ethan's death, surrounded by family, still teaching and telling stories, still the matriarch of the clan they'd created together. When she passed, also peacefully in her sleep, her children buried her beside Ethan on the hill overlooking the homestead. The garden they'd tended together spread out below, still thriving under the care of their descendants. At the funeral, Samuel, now a grandfather himself, spoke about his parents. They built this family with courage and love, he said. They showed us that the divisions people try to create between us are false, that what matters is how we treat each other, how we love each other. They came from different worlds but created a new world together, one where all of us could belong. That's the legacy they left us, and it's one we must continue to honor. The Armstrong family continued to grow and prosper in the years that followed. The homestead became a ranch, then eventually part of a larger family business that employed dozens of people. But through all the changes, the family never forgot their origins. The Apache girl who'd been caught stealing vegetables and the cowboy who'd left out food and, in doing so, had also left out his heart. The garden was maintained as a memorial, carefully tended by each generation. A plaque was placed there, telling the story of Ethan and Elara so that their descendants would never forget. And on summer evenings, when the work was done and the family gathered for dinner, someone would always tell the story of how it all began. With a hungry girl, a generous cowboy, and a love that refused to be bound by the prejudices of their time. A love that created a family, built a legacy, and proved that hope and compassion could triumph over fear and hate. It wasn't a perfect story. There had been too much struggle and pain for that, but it was a true one. And in the end, it was a story of love conquering all, of two people who found each other against the odds and built something beautiful that would last for generations. The Armstrong family remained in Arizona, their roots deep in the land that Ethan and Elara had worked so hard to make productive. The original homestead, where it all started, was preserved as a historical site, not for the public but for the family, a place where each new generation could come and connect with their history. In the garden where Elara had once stolen vegetables out of desperation, where Ethan had first left food for a stranger, their great-great-grandchildren still played, unaware of the full significance of the ground beneath their feet, but absorbed in the love that had been planted there so many years ago, a love that continued to bear fruit season after season, year after year, generation after generation.